Good afternoon. My name is Soraya, and I'd like to present to you my project on Cleopatra the Alchemist. I'd like to make a note that the picture seen on screen is not an accurate depiction of her. So before I get into Cleopatra and her work, we have to know who she was. So in a very broad sense, Cleopatra was Greek. She was a writer, artist, alchemist, and philosopher. She is believed to have been active in Alexandria between the 3rd and 4th century AD. Her writings and a lot of her work, her drawings, and a lot of her captions are considered to have been laying the foundations for alchemy. In fact, Michael Millet, an author of the 1610s Atlanta Phrynes, which, if I could direct your attention to the picture, this is the cover of Atlanta Phrynes. In this text, he had named Cleopatra as one of the few people and few women who could curate the Philosopher's Stone, which is a very, very big deal in alchemy. Another fair mention was in the Arabic encyclopedia Kitab al-Fuhurst in 988, where she was also mentioned. Before we get into Cleopatra, I'd like to make it known that a lot of history and a lot of her identity is very much still in the air. There are many theories as to who Cleopatra was because her documentation was very sparse and very unsettled. So the most common theory is that she was a real woman born in the 3rd century in the era of the ancient philosophy in Greece. She was active in Alexandria, so it is mainly theorized that she spent most of her childhood and adult life there. It was said that she was a practicing alchemist that published works to be distributed to scholars. However, later in this presentation, I will show partial to a second theory, and I will try to debunk the first one as we go along. So a second theory, and the one that I most prefer, is the name Cleopatra could be a pseudonym for an author or group of practicing alchemists. This theory is supported by multiple literary pieces, one of which, if I could direct your attention to the picture, is seen right here. Very cool. So, for example, I would like to call the Blaseraca of Filioseca by John Daniel Malais in 1618 to the stand. So, in this piece of text, Cleopatra is pictured as the Queen of Egypt. For those of you who don't know, Cleopatra is mainly associated with this depiction. So, one of the running theories that go along with this theory is that Cleopatra was not a person, but was instead a pseudonym and verbal mouthpiece, like, say, a cartoon character for alchemic text. So when I say pseudonym, I mean an author or authors that had written and published work under Cleopatra's name. This theory can also be supported by a similar author, Cleopatra the Physician. So both of these Cleopatras were said to have similar writing styles and, most blatantly, staring at you right in the face, names. Personally, I am of the theory that Cleopatra was not a real person and was instead a pseudonym. I find this more grounded in reality, and with the amount of work Cleopatra would have done, I find it more realistic. So you may have heard me mention it, or you may have read it in the slide, but Cleopatra was one of 4 women who were said to have curated the Philosopher's Stone, and one of the other women was Mary the Jewess, as depicted right here. So other notable alchemists of Cleopatra's time include, of course, Mary, Madare, and Prutinina, all practicing alchemists and authors. So the thing about Mary the Jewess is that we don't know a lot about her. In fact, most of the concrete evidence that we do know about her was seen and documented in the work and notes of Zosimos of Polymenios. So, through the notes of Zosimos, we know that Mary lived between 1st and 3rd century AD in Alexandria, same as our girl Cleopatra. We can also tell some of her beliefs through the descriptions of Zeno's notes. So it is said that when Mary the Jewess would practice her alchemy, she would speak of inanimate objects being able to possess bodies, souls, and spirits. So what I believe this says about Mary is that she was very compassionate and very loving in her work. And I feel like part of that is seen here as she makes the flowers rise with her alchemy. So the politics, the value of alchemy in uncertain times. So with Cleopatra the Alchemist, I have found when researching this whole project is that evidence is very, very hard to come by. While we do have a lot of documents from ancient Greece, a lot of it is still very up in the air because of how little it has and how much it just tends to bring up more questions. However, if we look at the time Cleopatra was active, the 1st and 3rd century AD in Alexandria, we find that there was much unrest in this Hellenistic period. So during this period, when Cleopatra was active, there was the reign of Ptolemy II and his sister wife Erisone II. So this reign was incredibly militaristic. It led to a lot of ruin, it led to a lot of deaths, and it led to a lot of Gaul. So what this reign aimed to do was invade saluted Syria. So they would try to raid it, they would try to infiltrate, and many of these were unsuccessful. So keep this in mind. While alchemists were not said to have practiced in war or in warfare, I feel the militaristic times of unrest and conflict had inspired Cleopatra or the authors that operated under her name in her later writing of Cleopatra of Cleopatra. So alchemists were not used in warfare, for example, their skills or their transmutation. The mysticism of alchemical ideas could be used in propaganda to boost morale of troops. You heard me mention it before, the Cleopatra of Cleopatra, the summary of writing. And if I could direct your attention to the picture right here, this is a snippet of one drawings that we're seeing in this work. So this piece of work by Cleopatra is widely considered one of the earliest alchemical manuscripts, and it is preserved perfectly. Interestingly enough, it is only one page and is comprised of captions, as you can see here, and imagery, as you can see by this little snaky guy. So most, if not all of which, are meant to describe a process of transmutation. So alchemy, transmutation, they go hand in hand. In the text, Cleopatra is presented as an alchemical prodigy who was able to transmutate gold through a spiritual and physical journey. So transmutating gold was one of the main goals of alchemy that is sadly, you can't do it. So on to the next topic, why I picked Cleopatra the Alchemist. And before we get into that, I would like to draw your attention to this picture, which is more work from her Xenophanes of Cleopatra. You can see the snake that was on the previous slide, and this is more symbols and captions, as you can see. So why did I pick Cleopatra? What I really love about her and her work is that it is still very much undecided and up in the air. While we do have evidence, as seen right here, that she was an alchemist and she did produce work, it is still very uncertain about her identity, as seen in the theories of her identity in the first couple slides. So because of this, because of her uncertainty in her and her work, of her basic identity, she is somewhat controversial. A lot of this modern day leaves much of her person to interpretation. I enjoy this fact about her because even her identity has mirrored her work of alchemy. It is constantly changing. Work in general is as mysterious as her identity. So one of her most popular is, of course, this and it is very mysterious, only of symbols and captions. While it does relate to alchemicals, it can also be viewed in a religious or spiritual light. So what I see a lot of people drawing upon is that the snake resembles the Bora Bora, or a snake-eating snake, or the snake that eats himself, representing infinity. So what I really like about her work is that a lot of it has endured throughout the ages and can be left up to the viewer's interpretation. So, enough about my opinion. What do the scholars think? And let me tell you, the scholar's opinion is very uncertain and full of conflict. So, for context, Cleopatra lived during the Hellenistic period, as stated before. And during this period in ancient Greece, alchemy was in its infancy. And while there were definitely practitioners of alchemy during her time, there was very little direct evidence that associate her with alchemical practice or work. While Cleopatra is often associated with alchemy, and the most popular imitation depicts her as the Queen of Egypt, many modern scholars approach the association of Cleopatra and her connections to alchemy with very, like, a lot of caution. So, what does this mean? The Cleosophia of Cleopatra is intriguing and concrete text for its insight into alchemical symbolism, but its connection to Cleopatra's personal interests or activities is widely debated and discussed. So, in conclusion, what is the scholar's opinion? It's divided, incredibly divided. So MLA, Works Cited, and my 4 scholarly sources. For the very last time, I would like to direct your attention to the picture. This is the cover of the book The Alchemist by F. Sherwood Taylor. It was published in 1930, and I had used pages 109 to 139. I would like to specifically point out this citation, and that is the end of my project. I really hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.